This is why you should never spread rumors. Once there was a girl called Grace who always wore a hat to school. Even in the summer, she always had a knitted black beanie pulled down to her eyes. Soon, the rumors started around school. Some people said she must have bald patches or have another medical condition that the students didn't know about. Either way, she was constantly bullied for always wearing that hat. One day, Grace's class had a new teacher whose eyes immediately fell on Grace. She said, "No hats in class." Grace's eyes widened and she went pale. "Well, what are you waiting for? Take it off." Grace replied, "I can't." The teacher grew angry, reached over, grabbed the hat, and yanked it off of Grace's head. The room fell silent. Then screams, vomit, terror, and chaos. The back of Grace's head was blown open. Bits of skull caved into her head. A small matching hole sat on her forehead near her hairline. Grace then stood up and ran out of the room, sobbing. That was the last anyone has ever seen of Grace. A couple years passed and people stopped talking about it as much until a new kid joined their class. A kid who always wears a scarf. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you couldn't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch? In 1983, a group of scientists thought that a human without any senses would be able to perceive God, so they found an elderly man who volunteered to have all of his senses surgically destroyed for this experiment. He would be completely alone with his thoughts. After a few days, he claimed that he heard his dead wife speaking to him. Then he began naming the dead relatives of the scientists and only information that their dead relatives would know. After a week, he started throwing himself against a wall to try and feel some kind of pain, but he couldn't. He tried to claw at his non-functioning eyes, but he felt nothing. He began to yell, "No heaven, no forgiveness," for 5 hours straight. In the end, he had to be physically restrained for weeks. When he turned his blind eyes and made direct eye contact for the first time with a scientist and said, "I have spoken to God, and he has abandoned us," before his heart stopped for no apparent reason.
This film is said to be one of the scariest films ever made. So scary, in fact, it can actually kill people. Netflix released a new film called Veronica, and it is said to be one of the scariest films to ever be made. This film is reportedly so terrifying that people are turning it off before it even finishes. Netflix themselves have even said that 1 out of 100 people watching this could actually watch the full film. Even experts have suggested that the film can actually kill people who have weak hearts. So watch this at your own risk.
Here's why you should never record yourself sleeping. So there was a woman who was a chronic sleep talker. One day at work, she was talking to her coworkers about dreams. A couple of the coworkers were telling their scariest dreams, and the woman replied, "I don't really dream, I'm just a sleep talker." So the other coworkers insisted that she record herself sleeping to see maybe if she says something during the night. So she downloads a voice recording app and puts it on her nightstand before she goes to sleep. For the next 2 months, she recorded some really cool stuff up until one night. As she was listening to herself sleep, she heard in the background the door slam. She had no idea why the door would slam because she lives alone. So she listened to the recording of the door slamming and she just went right back to sleep. And while she was sleeping, she woke up to another door being slammed. So she freaked out to go see which door opened because she maybe thought there was an intruder. But to her surprise, she found there was nobody else in the house. So since she's already freaking out, she went back to sleep to try and get some rest. And like every other single morning, she wakes up to listen to herself sleep. She's listening to the recording and she hears a man say, "Nice try," in a very faint voice. Like and follow for part 2.
Scary Things You Say Part 23. My son said to me, "Remember when I was Uncle Maury?" That was my brother. His name was Maury. He died when he was 33 and my son was born 5 years later. When I was little, over a year old, my mom was walking down the stairs. I told her, "Be careful, Mommy. That's how my husband died." What the heck? Babies know everything. I was 5. I found it out because my little brother talked to me, but no one believes me. He said, "I know your pain." I was screaming. My son was 3.5 years when he told me how much I was crying for a baby. He'd say, "God told me to wait because it wasn't my time." This is so I find it fascinating, actually, not scary. Mine asks why the little boy that lives with us is always sad. I had a miscarriage prior to having him. Oh, this is so sad. My 6-year-old niece once asked, "Where were we before we were here?"
This is why you should never ask too many questions. Once there was an old lady who was widowed and wheelchair bound, living in a house with 2 floors with her caretaker. One day, the police received a call from this old lady's house. The caretaker had been murdered. One detective was sent to investigate, where he found the caretaker's body on the 1st floor, vocal cords ripped out, lying in a pool of blood. The old lady was ruled out as a suspect because she was immobile, but the detective did note that this crime seemed familiar to how the widowed husband died years ago. He had suffocated in his sleep on the couch downstairs when the old lady was upstairs. After getting evidence from the 1st floor crime scene, the detective asked to look upstairs as well. The old lady refused at first, but he insisted and went up anyways. Everything seemed pretty normal until a shocking revelation came over him, and it sent chills down his spine. It was a detail that investigators had overlooked in the murder of the widow's husband as well. There is no phone on the 2nd floor. The detective then suddenly heard a noise, withdrew his weapon, and ran out of the room, only to find an empty wheelchair.
Trigger warning, this video contains stalking and graphic violence. It had been 8 months and I hadn't heard anything. I was living my best life and I had a boyfriend, my very first. I went over to his house to meet his parents, and on that night I got a text message that said if I didn't leave, things would get bad, with the signature always watching. They had a cat that they let roam around outside. Later in the afternoon, it was time for my boyfriend's mom to take me home. As we were leaving, when we opened the door, his cat was on the front porch, gutted, with a note that said, "Always watching," written in something red and sticky. Immediately, we called the police. A report was made, my phone was finally taken into evidence, and the note was taken into evidence. They obviously let us keep the cat to bury it, and nothing was done. A few months later, I got my phone back, and they said that the numbers were fake, and somebody was using a computer to change their location, and that there was nothing that they could do. In part 4, things will be very graphic and very violent, so I might take a while to do it, so please be patient with me.
Today we're going to hire a hacker on the dark web. This is probably going to be the stupidest video, but first let me tell you what the dark web is. Alright, so this is the surface web. This is like your Facebook, your TikTok, your Instagram, everything for any day use. This is your deep web. This is where like the semi-bad guys are. Here's where we're going. Today we're going to go on the dark web and we're going to see if maybe I can hire a hacker. Okay, so you have to use a browser called Tor in order to actually access it because Google doesn't let you do it. Okay, I just opened up Tor and I want you guys to look at this link. This is the link that I just had to type in, and then bam, rent a hacker. I will do anything for money, simply hacking, causing a lot of technical trouble on websites, getting private information on somebody, ruining your opponent. Okay, I think I found it. Small job, for example, email and Facebook hacking. So for 250 euros, this guy's gonna hack me.
250 euros is about $298 and 10 cents.
All right, let's do it. Come back tomorrow for a part 2.
So I recently bought a house that had been abandoned since the 1990s. Teenagers used to party there. It was a repo, there was a hole in the roof, and the original owners had left a bunch of stuff, old family photos and all sorts of things. I tried to get in contact with them. They never wanted anything. I never checked the attic until recently, and this is what I found.
This is why you should always pay attention to details. A woman was brushing her hair when she found a little bump at the back of her head, so she called her husband to have him check it out for her. He said it looks like a button. It's small, round, hairless, and flat at the top. He joked around it with her, asking, "What do you think would happen if I pressed it?" Then he did, and the woman instantly leaned up and gave him a kiss. Then the husband kept pressing it as a joke, but something went wrong. It seemed like he pressed it all too many times, and a cool numbness spread down the woman's neck, around her arms and her legs. Her eyes automatically shut and her vision went black. A while later, the woman woke up and learned that she had fainted. The husband kept apologizing with tears in his eyes as if it was all his fault. Eventually, they both went about their lives and tried to forget about this incident, but the woman just couldn't, because afterwards, she came across a photo of her family in the living room. It was a photo of her and her husband's wedding propped up on a ceramic urn. She looked closer at the photo of her own face. She's smiling as if she's the happiest girl in the world, but there's a small scar under her left eyebrow, a scar that she now didn't have.
Pictures taken right before death. First, we have this 18-year-old girl who wanted to get the most extreme selfie, so she climbed up a bridge which was about 30 feet high. And then she fell off, but it wasn't the fall that killed her. It was on her way down, she grabbed some electrical wires and they electrocuted her. This picture was actually taken by a guy who was just testing out the new camera that he got, and it shows this 14-year-old boy literally flying out of a plane. It turns out he was hidden in the plane wheels, and during takeoff, he somehow fell out and it was caught on camera. This looks like your typical best friend picture before a night out, right? Except the night would end in disaster, with one of them using the belt she was wearing to strangle the other. And she then blamed it on being intoxicated and said she couldn't remember anything of the night anyways.
This is why you should always keep pictures of your parents. A little girl named Olivia, who lived a very quiet life, decided to check her homework assignments that were posted online. The teacher posted that they needed to write down their favorite memory with their family, as well as bring a photograph. Olivia then writes about how her and her mom play dolls every night in the basement before bed, and that she has a lot of fun doing so. She finishes her paragraph and then looks in her dad's drawer for a photograph of mom. She only found pictures of her mom from high school, but decided to use it anyway. Olivia goes to bed and wakes up the next morning. Once she arrives at school, the teacher then says, "Let's start presenting our project." Then the teacher called Olivia's name to present. Olivia then begins to read about how her and her mom play dolls every night, and then pulls out the photograph. As soon as Olivia pulled out the photograph, her teacher's face goes numb. She then asks Olivia if she can take a closer look at the photograph. She then recognized her mom as one of her previous students. Then the teacher asks, "Where did you get this photo?" Olivia says, "My dad keeps them in his drawer." The teacher, shocked, sits down Olivia and pulls out an old newspaper. The newspaper headline, "Local high school teen murdered, boyfriend gone missing." The teacher then looks at Olivia and says, "Your mom has been dead for 14 years.
I'm going to be telling you the scary story of the house I lived in elementary and middle school. It was a 3-bedroom house, 1 bedroom in the basement, and 2 bedrooms upstairs. Because I was the oldest, I got put in the bedroom in the basement. Right when we moved in, I already had creepy feelings about the house. I hated being downstairs by myself. One day I dropped a $20 bill behind my dresser. I decided to move my dresser all by myself, and behind the dresser was this door. It wasn't a normal door, it was really short and just squared. It was also glued off, so I couldn't get into it. Me and my neighbor, who were best friends, worked at it for days to get into it. We finally got it open, and inside was another room. It was almost like an underground attic. The walls were wooden, the ceiling was wooden, there was no carpet, but it smelled awful. My parents found out and they were super mad at me for opening the room. They of course put that dresser in front of that door for a reason, because they knew I would explore it. But after that, things started to get weird. Stay tuned for part 2.
This is why you should always lock your front doors. A kid living with both of his parents decided to watch a movie for their family weekly movie night. He then gets up to use the restroom. As he is in the restroom, he sees all of the power in the house cuts off, and then he hears 2 loud thumps. He locks the bathroom door and hears heavy objects being dragged across the hallway. The kid, freaking out, runs out of the bathroom and runs into the restroom. Once he is inside the room, he locks the door. As he locks the door, he jumps in bed and acts like he's asleep and hopes that this person who is in the house will ignore a child sleeping. He closes his eyes and hears the door creak at the same time. He squints his eyes and sees a man with no eyes dragging the bodies of both of his parents. The man dragging his parents sits his mom's dead body in a chair facing him, and then sets the dad's body on the floor facing up. It was almost like whoever was in the house who killed them wanted him to see it. He then sees the man writing something on the wall and then climbs under his bed. He laid there for hours knowing that if he moved a muscle, he would end up just like his parents. He finally built up enough courage to read the wall, and the writing on the wall said, "I know you're awake."
If you're ever walking and hear a sound behind you, look up, for it might be the Gashadokuru. The Gashadokuru are skeleton giants who walk around in the middle of the night. If they see a human, they will quietly walk up behind them, bite off their head, and drink their spraying blood. Soldiers that die on the field and people that die of starvation usually do not have their final rites read. In Japanese culture, that means that their soul cannot pass on and they're reborn as a hungry ghost. When the bones of hundreds of those souls gather together, they become the skeleton monster known as Gashadokuru. If you're a fan of monsters, scary stories, and lore, please support this channel. Thank you guys.